Daniel, chapter 1. In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon marched on Jerusalem and besieged it. The Lord let Jehoiakim king of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vessels belonging to the temple of God. These he took away to Shinar, putting the vessels into the treasury of his own gods. From the Israelites, the king ordered Ashpenaz, his chief eunuch, to bring a certain number of boys of royal or noble descent. They had to be without any physical defect, of good appearance, versed in every branch of wisdom, well-informed, discerning, suitable for service at the royal court. Ashpenaz was to teach them to speak and write the language of the Chaldeans. The king assigned them a daily allowance of food and wine from the royal table. They were to receive an education lasting for 3 years, after which they would enter the royal service. Among them were the Judeans Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief eunuch gave them other names, calling Daniel Belteshazzar, Hananiah Shadrach, Mishael Meshach, and Azariah Abednego. Daniel, who was determined not to incur pollution by food and wine from the royal table, begged the chief eunuch to spare him this defilement. God allowed Daniel to receive faithful love and sympathy from the chief eunuch. But the eunuch warned Daniel, "I am afraid of my lord the king. He has assigned you food and drink, and if he sees you looking thinner in the face than the other boys of your age, my head will be in danger with the king because of you." To the guard assigned to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah by the chief eunuch, Daniel then said, "Please allow your servants a 10 days' trial, during which we are given only vegetables to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our looks with those of the boys who eat the king's food. Go by what you see, and treat your servants accordingly." The man agreed to do what they asked and put them on 10 days' trial. When the 10 days were over, they looked better and fatter than any of the boys who had eaten their allowance from the royal table. So the guard withdrew their allowance of food and the wine they were to drink, and gave them vegetables. To these 4 boys God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and learning. Daniel also had the gift of interpreting every kind of vision and dream. When the time stipulated by the king for the boys to be presented to him came round, the chief eunuch presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king conversed with them, and among all the boys found none to equal Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they became members of the king's court, and on whatever point of wisdom or understanding he might question them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and soothsayers in his entire kingdom. Daniel remained there until the 1st year of King Cyrus. Daniel, chapter 2. In the 2nd year of his reign, Nebuchadnezzar had a series of dreams. He was perturbed by this, and sleep deserted him. The king then had magicians and soothsayers, sorcerers and Chaldeans summoned to tell him what his dreams meant. They arrived and stood in the king's presence. The king said to them, "I have had a dream, and my mind is troubled by a wish to understand it." The Chaldeans answered the king, "May your majesty live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we shall reveal its meaning for you." The king answered the Chaldeans, "This is my firm resolve. If you cannot tell me what I dreamt and what it means, I shall have you torn limb from limb and your houses turned into dunghills. If, on the other hand, you can tell me what I dreamt and what it means, I shall give you presents, rewards, and high honor. So tell me what I dreamt and what it means." A second time they said, "Let the king tell his dream to his servants, and we shall reveal its meaning." But the king retorted, "It is plain to me that you are trying to gain time, knowing my proclaimed resolve. If you do not interpret my dream for me, there will be but one sentence passed on you all. You have agreed among yourselves to make me misleading and tortuous speeches while the time goes by. So tell me what my dream was, and then I shall know whether you can interpret it." The Chaldeans answered the king, "Nobody in the world could explain the king's problem. What is more, no other king, governor, or chief would think of putting such a question to any magician, soothsayer, or Chaldean. The question the king asks is difficult, and no one can find the king an answer to it, except the gods, whose dwelling is not with mortals." At this the king flew into a rage and ordered all the Babylonian sages to be put to death. On publication of the decree to have the sages killed, search was made for Daniel and his companions to have them put to death. Then, with shrewd and cautious words, Daniel approached Arioch, the king's chief executioner, when he was on his way to kill the Babylonian sages. To this royal official Arioch he said, "Why has the king issued such a harsh decree?" Arioch explained matters to Daniel, and Daniel went off to ask the king for a stay of execution to give him the opportunity of revealing his interpretation to the king. Daniel then went home and told his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah what had happened, urging them to beg the God of heaven to show his mercy and explain the mysterious secret, so that Daniel and his friends might be spared the fate of the other Babylonian sages. The mystery was then revealed to Daniel in a night vision, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. This is what Daniel said: "May the name of God be blessed forever and ever, since wisdom and power are his alone. It is he who controls the procession of times and seasons, who makes and unmakes kings, who confers wisdom on the wise, and knowledge on those with discernment, who uncovers depths and mysteries, who knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. To you, God of my fathers, I give thanks and praise for having given me wisdom and strength. To me you have explained what we asked you, to us you have explained the king's problem." So Daniel went to see Arioch, whom the king had made responsible for putting the Babylonian sages to death. Going in, he said, "Do not put the Babylonian sages to death. Take me into the king's presence, and I will reveal the meaning to the king." Arioch lost no time in bringing Daniel to the king. "Among the exiles from Judah," he said, "I have discovered a man who can reveal the meaning to the king." The king said to Daniel, who had been given the name Belteshazzar, "Can you tell me what I dreamt and what it means?" Facing the king, Daniel replied, "None of the sages, soothsayers, magicians, or exorcists has been able to tell the king the truth of the mystery which the king has propounded. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries and who has shown King Nebuchadnezzar what is to take place in the final days. These, then, are the dream and the visions that pass through your head as you lay in bed. Your Majesty, on your bed your thoughts turn to what would happen in the future, and the revealer of mysteries disclosed to you what is to take place. This mystery has been revealed to me, not that I am wiser than anyone else, but for this sole purpose, that the king should learn what it means, and that you should understand your inmost thoughts. You have had a vision, Your Majesty. This is what you saw. A statue, a great statue of extreme brightness, stood before you, terrible to see. The head of this statue was of fine gold, its chest and arms were of silver, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, its feet part iron, part clay. While you were gazing, a stone broke away, untouched by any hand, and struck the statue, struck its feet of iron and clay and shattered them. Then iron and clay, bronze, silver and gold, all broke into pieces as fine as chaff on the threshing floor in summer. The wind blew them away, leaving not a trace behind. And the stone that had struck the statue grew into a great mountain, filling the whole world. This was the dream. We shall now explain to the king what it means. You, Your Majesty, King of Kings, to whom the God of heaven has given sovereignty, power, strength and honor, human beings, wild animals, birds of the air, wherever they live, he has entrusted to your rule, making you king of them all. You are the golden head. And after you, another kingdom will rise, not as great as yours, and then a third of bronze, which will rule the whole world. There will be a fourth kingdom, hard as iron that pulverizes and crushes all. Like iron that breaks everything to pieces, it will crush and break all the earlier kingdoms. The feet you saw, part earthenware, part iron, are a kingdom which will be split in two, but which will retain something of the strength of iron, just as you saw the iron and the clay of the earthenware mixed together. The feet were part iron, part potter's clay. The kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron and the clay of the earthenware mixed together, so the two will be mixed together in human seed, but they will not hold together any more than iron will blend with clay. In the days of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and this kingdom will not pass into the hands of another race. It will shatter and absorb all the previous kingdoms and itself last forever, just as you saw a stone, untouched by hand, break away from the mountain and reduce iron, bronze, earthenware, silver and gold to powder. The great God has shown the king what is to take place. The dream is true, the interpretation exact. At this, King Nebuchadnezzar fell prostrate before Daniel. He gave orders for Daniel to be offered an oblation and a fragrant sacrifice. The king said to Daniel, "Your God is indeed the God of gods, the master of kings, and the revealer of mysteries, since you have been able to reveal this mystery." The king then conferred high rank on Daniel and gave him many handsome presents. He also made him governor of the whole province of Babylon and head of all the sages of Babylon. At Daniel's request, the king entrusted the affairs of the province of Babylon to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel himself remained in attendance on the king. Daniel, chapter 3. King Nebuchadnezzar had a golden statue made, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, which he set up on the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar then summoned the satraps, magistrates, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, lawyers, and all the provincial authorities to assemble and attend the dedication of the statue set up by King Nebuchadnezzar. Satraps, magistrates, governors, counselors, treasurers, judges, lawyers, and all the provincial authorities then assembled for the dedication of the statue set up by King Nebuchadnezzar and stood in front of the statue which King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. A herald then loudly proclaimed, "Peoples, nations, languages, thus are you commanded. The moment you hear the sound of horn, pipe, lyre, zither, harp, bagpipe, and every other kind of instrument, you will prostrate yourselves and worship the golden statue set up by King Nebuchadnezzar. Anyone who does not prostrate himself and worship will immediately be thrown into the burning fiery furnace." And so, the instant all the peoples heard the sound of horn, pipe, lyre, zither, harp, bagpipe, and all the other instruments, all the peoples, nations, and languages prostrated themselves and worshipped the statue set up by King Nebuchadnezzar. Some Chaldeans then came forward and maliciously accused the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May your majesty live forever. You have issued a decree, your majesty, to the effect that everyone on hearing the sound of horn, pipe, lyre, zither, harp, bagpipe, and every other kind of instrument is to prostrate himself and worship the golden statue, and that anyone who does not prostrate himself and worship is to be thrown into the burning fiery furnace. Now, there are certain Jews to whom you have entrusted the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men have ignored your command, your majesty. They do not serve your gods, and refuse to worship the golden statue you have set up." Shaking with fury, Nebuchadnezzar sent for Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The men were immediately brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar addressed them, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, is it true that you do not serve my gods, and that you refuse to worship the golden statue I have set up? When you hear the sound of horn, pipe, lyre, zither, harp, bagpipe, and every other kind of instrument, are you prepared to prostrate yourselves and worship the statue I have made? If you refuse to worship it, you will be thrown forthwith into the burning fiery furnace. Then which of the gods could save you from my power?" Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to King Nebuchadnezzar, "Your question needs no answer from us. If our God, the one we serve, is able to save us from the burning fiery furnace and from your power, your majesty, he will save us. And even if he does not, then you must know, your majesty, that we will not serve your God or worship the statue you have set up." This infuriated King Nebuchadnezzar. His expression was changed now as he looked at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He gave orders for the furnace to be made 7 times hotter than usual and commanded certain stalwarts from his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the burning fiery furnace. They were then bound in their cloaks, trousers, headgear and other garments, and thrown into the burning fiery furnace. The king's command was so urgent and the heat of the furnace was so fierce that the men carrying Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were burnt to death by the flames from the fire. The three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell, bound, into the burning fiery furnace. And they walked in the heart of the flames, praising God and blessing the Lord. Azariah stood in the heart of the fire, praying aloud thus: May you be blessed and revered, Lord, God of our ancestors. May your name be held glorious forever. For you are upright in all that you have done for us. All your deeds are true, all your ways right, all your judgments true. True is the sentence you have given in all that you have brought down on us and on Jerusalem, the holy city of our ancestors. For you have treated us rightly and truly, as our sins deserve. Yes, we have sinned and committed a crime by deserting you. Yes, we have greatly sinned. We have not listened to your commandments, we have not observed them. We have not done what you commanded us to do for our own good. Yes, all that you have brought down on us, all that you have done to us, you have been fully justified in doing. You have handed us over to our enemies, to a lawless people, the worst of the godless, to an unjust king, the worst in the whole world. Today we have no right to open our mouths. Shame and dishonor are the lot of those who serve and worship you. Do not abandon us forever, for the sake of your name. Do not repudiate your covenant. Do not withdraw your favor from us, for the sake of Abraham, your friend, of Isaac, your servant, and of Israel, your Holy One, to whom you promised to make their descendants as many as the stars of heaven and as the grains of sand on the seashore. Lord, we have become the least of all nations. We are put to shame today throughout the world because of our sins. We now have no leader, no prophet, no prince, no burnt offering, no sacrifice, no oblation, no incense, no place where we can make offerings to you and win your favor. But may the contrite soul, the humbled spirit, be as acceptable to you as burnt offerings of rams and bullocks, as thousands of fat lambs. Such let our sacrifice be to you today, and may it please you that we follow you wholeheartedly, since those who trust in you will not be shamed. And now we put our whole heart into following you, into fearing you and seeking your face once more. Do not abandon us to shame, but treat us in accordance with your gentleness, in accordance with the greatness of your mercy. Rescue us in accordance with your wonderful deeds and win fresh glory for your name. O Lord, confusion seize all who ill-treat your servants. May they be covered with shame, deprived of all their power, and may their strength be broken. Let them learn that you alone are God and Lord, glorious over the whole world. All this time, the king's servants, who had thrown them into the furnace, had been stoking it with crude oil, pitch, tow, and brushwood until the flames rose 49 cubits above the furnace and, leaping out, burnt those Chaldeans to death who were standing round it. But the angel of the Lord came down into the furnace beside Azariah and his companions. He drove the flames of the fire outwards from the furnace and, in the heart of the furnace, wafted a coolness to them as of the breeze and dew, so that the fire did not touch them at all and caused them no pain or distress. Then all three in unison began to sing, glorifying and blessing God in the furnace, with the words, May you be blessed, Lord, God of our ancestors, be praised and extolled forever. Blessed be your glorious and holy name, praised and extolled forever. May you be blessed in the temple of your sacred glory, exalted and glorified above all forever. Blessed on the throne of your kingdom, exalted above all, glorified forever. Blessed are you who fathom the abyss, enthroned on the winged creatures, praised and exalted above all forever. Blessed in the expanse of the heavens, exalted and glorified forever. Bless the Lord, all the Lord's creation. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, angels of the Lord. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, heavens. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, all the waters above the heavens. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, powers of the Lord. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, sun and moon. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, stars of heaven. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, all rain and dew. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, every wind. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, fire and heat. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, cold and warmth. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, dew and snowstorm. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, frost and cold. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, ice and snow. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, nights and days. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, light and darkness. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, lightning and cloud. Praise and glorify him forever. Let the earth bless the Lord. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, mountains and hills. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, every plant that grows. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, springs of water. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, seas and rivers. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, whales, and everything that moves in the waters. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, every kind of bird. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, all animals wild and tame. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, all the human race. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, O Israel. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, priests. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, his servants. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, spirits and souls of the upright. Praise and glorify him forever. Bless the Lord, faithful, humble-hearted people. Praise and glorify him forever. Hananiah, Azariah and Mishael. Bless the Lord, praise and glorify him forever. For he has rescued us from the underworld. He has saved us from the hand of death. He has snatched us from the burning fiery furnace. He has drawn us from the heart of the flame. Give thanks to the Lord, for he is good, for his love is everlasting. Bless the Lord, the God of gods, all who fear him. Give praise and thanks to him, for his love is everlasting. King Nebuchadnezzar sprang to his feet in amazement. He said to his advisers, "Did we not have these 3 men thrown bound into the fire?" They answered the king, "Certainly, your majesty." "But," he went on, "I can see 4 men walking free in the heart of the fire and quite unharmed. And the 4th looks like a child of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar approached the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of God Most High, come out, come here." And from the heart of the fire out came Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The satraps, magistrates, governors, and advisers of the king crowded round the 3 men to examine them. The fire had had no effect on their bodies. Not a hair of their heads had been singed. Their cloaks were not scorched. No smell of burning hung about them. Nebuchadnezzar said, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He has sent his angel to rescue his servants who, putting their trust in him, defied the order of the king, and preferred to forfeit their bodies rather than serve or worship any god but their God. I therefore decree as follows: peoples, nations, and languages, let any of you speak disrespectfully of the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and I shall have him torn limb from limb and his house turned into a dunghill. For there is no other God who can save like this." The king then showered favors on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar, to all peoples, nations, and languages dwelling throughout the world, may you prosper more and more. It is my pleasure to make known the signs and wonders with which the Most High God has favored me. How great his signs! How mighty his wonders! His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom. His empire endures age after age. Daniel, chapter 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was living comfortably in my house, prosperously in my palace. I had a dream. It appalled me. Dread assailed me as I lay in bed. The visions that passed through my head tormented me. So I decreed that all the sages of Babylon be summoned to explain to me what the dream meant. Magicians, soothsayers, Chaldeans, and exorcists came, and I told them what I had dreamt, but they could not interpret it for me. Daniel, renamed Belteshazzar after my own God, and in whom the spirit of the holy gods resides, then came into my presence. I told him my dream. Belteshazzar, chief of magicians, I said, I know that the spirit of the holy gods resides in you and that no mystery puts you at a loss. This is the dream I have had. Tell me what it means. The visions that passed through my head as I lay in bed were these. I saw a tree in the middle of the world. It was very tall. The tree grew taller and stronger, until its top reached the sky and it could be seen from the very ends of the earth. Its foliage was beautiful, its fruit abundant, in it was food for all. For the wild animals it provided shade, the birds of heaven nested in its branches. All living creatures found their food on it. I watched the visions passing through my head as I lay in bed. Next, a watchful one, a holy one, came down from heaven. At the top of his voice he shouted, Cut the tree down, lop off its branches, strip off its leaves, throw away its fruit, let the animals flee from its shelter and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump with its roots in the ground, bound with hoops of iron and bronze, in the grass of the countryside. Let it be drenched by the dew of heaven and have its lot with the animals, eating grass. Let it cease to have a human heart, and be given the heart of a beast, and 7 times shall pass over him. Such is the sentence proclaimed by the watchers, the verdict announced by the holy ones, so that every living thing may learn that the Most High rules over human sovereignty. He confers it on whom he pleases, and raises the lowest of humankind. This was the dream I had, I, Nebuchadnezzar the king. Now it is for you, Belteshazzar, to pronounce on its meaning, since not one of the sages in my kingdom has been able to interpret it for me. You, however, can do so, since the spirit of the holy gods resides in you. Daniel, known as Belteshazzar, was confused for a time and upset. The king said, Belteshazzar, do not be upset at the dream and its meaning. Belteshazzar answered, My lord, may the dream apply to those who hate you, and its meaning to your foes. The tree you saw, so large and strong and tall that it reached the sky and could be seen throughout the world, the tree with beautiful foliage and abundant fruit, with food for all in it, providing shade for the wild animals, with the birds of heaven nesting in its branches. That tree is yourself, your majesty, for you have grown great and strong. Your stature is now so great that it reaches the sky, and your empire extends to the ends of the earth. And the watchful one seen by the king, the Holy One coming down from heaven and saying, Cut the tree down and destroy it, but leave stump and roots in the ground, bound with hoops of iron and bronze in the grass of the countryside. Let it be drenched by the dew and have its lot with the wild animals until 7 times have passed over. The meaning of this, your majesty, the verdict of the Most High passed on my lord the king, is this. You will be driven from human society and will make your home with the wild animals. You will feed on grass, as oxen do. You will be drenched by the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass over you until you have learnt that the Most High rules over human sovereignty and confers it on whom he pleases. And the order, leave the stump and roots of the tree, means that your kingdom will be kept for you until you come to understand that heaven rules all. May it please the king to accept my advice. By upright actions break with your sins, break with your crimes by showing mercy to the poor, and so live long and peacefully. This all happened to King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of 12 months, while strolling on the roof of the royal palace in Babylon, the king was saying, Great Babylon! Was it not built by me as a royal residence, by the force of my might and for the majesty of my glory? The words were not out of his mouth when a voice came down from heaven. Of you, King Nebuchadnezzar, it is decreed. The empire has been taken from you. You will be driven from human society and will make your home with the wild animals. You will feed on grass, as oxen do, and 7 times will pass over you until you have learnt that the Most High rules over human sovereignty and gives it to whom he pleases. The words were immediately fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar was driven from human society and ate grass as oxen do. He was drenched by the dew of heaven. His hair grew like an eagle's feathers, and his nails became like a bird's talons. When the time was over, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes to heaven. My reason returned, and I blessed the Most High, praising and glorifying him who lives forever. For his empire is an everlasting empire. His kingship endures, age after age. All who dwell on earth count for nothing. As he thinks fit, he disposes the army of heaven and those who dwell on earth. No one can arrest his hand or ask him, "What have you done?" At that moment my reason returned and, for the honor of my royal state, my glory and splendor returned too. My counselors and noblemen acclaimed me. I was restored to my throne, and to my past greatness even more was added. And now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, extol and glorify the King of heaven, all of whose deeds are true, all of whose ways are right, and who can humble those who walk in pride. Daniel, chapter 5. King Belshazzar gave a great banquet for his noblemen, 1,000 of them, and in the presence of this 1,000 he drank his wine. Having tasted the wine, Belshazzar gave orders for the gold and silver vessels to be brought which his father Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the sanctuary in Jerusalem, so that the king, his noblemen, his wives and the women who sang for him could drink out of them. The gold and silver vessels taken from the sanctuary of the temple of God in Jerusalem were brought in, and the king, his noblemen, his wives and the women who sang for him drank out of them. They drank their wine and praised their idols of gold and silver, of bronze and iron, of wood and stone. Suddenly, the fingers of a human hand appeared and began to write on the plaster of the palace wall, directly behind the lampstand, and the king could see the hand as it wrote. The king turned pale with alarm. His hip joints went slack and his knees began to knock. He shouted for his soothsayers, Chaldeans, and exorcists. And the king said to the Babylonian sages, "Anyone who can read this writing and tell me what it means shall be dressed in purple, and have a chain of gold put round his neck, and be one of the 3 men who govern the kingdom." The king's sages all crowded forward, but they could neither read the writing nor explain to the king what it meant. Greatly alarmed, King Belshazzar turned even paler, and his noblemen were equally disturbed. Then the queen, attracted by the noise made by the king and his noblemen, came into the banqueting hall. "May your majesty live forever," said the queen. "Do not be alarmed. Do not look so pale. In your kingdom there is a man in whom lives the spirit of the holy gods. In your father's days he was known for a perception, intelligence, and wisdom comparable to that of the gods. King Nebuchadnezzar, your father, made him head of the magicians, soothsayers, Chaldeans, and exorcists. Since this man Daniel, whom the king had renamed Belteshazzar, is filled with such a marvelous spirit and such knowledge and intelligence in interpreting dreams, solving enigmas and unraveling difficult problems, send for him. He will be able to tell you what this means." Daniel was brought into the king's presence. The king said to Daniel, "Are you the Daniel who was one of the Judean exiles brought by my father the king from Judah? I am told that the spirit of the gods lives in you, and that you are known for your perception, intelligence, and marvelous wisdom. The sages and soothsayers have already been brought to me to read this writing and tell me what it means, but they have been unable to reveal its meaning. I am told that you are able to give interpretations and to unravel difficult problems. So if you can read the writing and tell me what it means, you shall be dressed in purple, and have a chain of gold put round your neck, and be one of the 3 men who govern the kingdom." Then Daniel spoke up in the presence of the king. "Keep your gifts for yourself," he said, "and give your rewards to others. I can certainly read the writing to the king and tell him what it means. Your Majesty, the Most High God gave Nebuchadnezzar your father sovereignty, greatness, majesty, and glory. He made him so great that all peoples, nations, and languages shook with dread before him. He killed whom he pleased, spared whom he pleased, promoted whom he pleased, degraded whom he pleased. But because his heart grew swollen with pride, and his spirit stiff with arrogance, he was deposed from his sovereign throne and stripped of his glory. He was driven from human society. His heart was more like an animal's than a man's. He lived with the wild donkeys. He fed on grass like oxen. His body was drenched by the dew of heaven, until he had learnt that the Most High rules over human sovereignty and appoints whom he pleases to rule it. But you, Belshazzar, who are his son, you have not humbled your heart, in spite of knowing all this. You have defied the Lord of heaven. You have had the vessels from his temple brought to you, and you, your noblemen, your wives and the women singing for you have drunk your wine out of them. You have praised gods of gold and silver, of bronze and iron, of wood and stone, which can neither see, hear, nor understand. But you have given no glory to the God in whose hands are your breath itself and all your fortunes. That is why he has sent the hand which has written these words. The writing reads, Mean, Tekel, and Parsin. The meaning of the words is this. Mean, God has measured your sovereignty and put an end to it. Tekel, you have been weighed in the balance and found wanting. Parsin, your kingdom has been divided and given to the Medes and the Persians. At Belshazzar's order Daniel was dressed in purple. A chain of gold was put round his neck, and he was proclaimed as one of the 3 men who governed the kingdom. That same night, the Chaldean king Belshazzar was murdered. Daniel, chapter 6. And Darius the Mede received the kingdom, at the age of 62. It pleased Darius to appoint 120 satraps over his kingdom for the various parts, and over them 3 presidents, of whom Daniel was one, to whom the satraps were to be responsible. This was to safeguard the king's interests. This Daniel, by virtue of the marvelous spirit residing in him, was so evidently superior to the other presidents and satraps that the king considered appointing him to rule the whole kingdom. The presidents and satraps, in consequence, started hunting for some affair of state by which they could discredit Daniel, but they could find nothing to his discredit, and no case of negligence. He was so punctilious that they could not find a single instance of maladministration or neglect. These men then thought, We shall never find a way of discrediting Daniel unless we try something to do with the law of his God. The presidents and satraps then went in a body to the king. King Darius, they said, live forever. We are all agreed, presidents of the realm, magistrates, satraps, counselors, and governors, that the king should issue an edict enforcing the following regulation. Whoever within the next 30 days prays to anyone, divine or human, other than to yourself, your majesty, is to be thrown into the lion's den. Your majesty, ratify the edict at once by signing this document, making it unalterable, as befits the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. King Darius accordingly signed the document embodying the edict. When Daniel heard that the document had been signed, he retired to his house. The windows of his upstairs room faced towards Jerusalem. 3 times each day, he went down on his knees, praying and giving praise to God as he had always done. These men came along in a body and found Daniel praying and pleading with God. They then went to the king and reminded him of the royal edict. Have you not signed an edict forbidding anyone for the next 30 days to pray to anyone, divine or human, other than to yourself, your majesty, on pain of being thrown into the lion's den? The decision stands, the king replied, as befits the law of the Medes and the Persians, which cannot be revoked. They then said to the king, Your majesty, this man Daniel, one of the exiles from Judah, disregards both you and the edict which you have signed. He is at his prayers 3 times each day. When the king heard these words, he was deeply distressed and determined to save Daniel. He racked his brains until sunset to find some way to save him. But the men kept pressing the king, Your majesty, Remember that in conformity with the law of the Medes and the Persians, no edict or decree can be altered when once issued by the king. The king then ordered Daniel to be brought and thrown into the lion pit. The king said to Daniel, "Your God, whom you have served so faithfully, will have to save you." A stone was then brought and laid over the mouth of the pit, and the king sealed it with his own signet and with that of his noblemen, so that there could be no going back on the original decision about Daniel. The king returned to his palace, spent the night in fasting, and refused to receive any of his concubines. Sleep eluded him, and at the first sign of dawn he got up and hurried to the lion pit. As he approached the pit he called in anguished tones to Daniel, "Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve so faithfully, been able to save you from the lions?" Daniel answered the king, "May your majesty live forever. My God sent his angel who sealed the lions' jaws. They did me no harm, since in his sight I am blameless. Neither have I ever done you any wrong, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and ordered Daniel to be released from the pit. Daniel was released from the pit and found to be quite unhurt, because he had trusted in his God. The king then sent for the men who had accused Daniel and had them thrown into the lion pit, and their wives and children too. And before they reached the floor of the pit, the lions had seized them and crushed their bones to pieces. King Darius then wrote to all nations, peoples and languages dwelling throughout the world, "May you prosper more and more. This is my decree. Throughout every dominion of my realm, let all tremble with fear before the God of Daniel. He is the living God. He endures forever. His kingdom will never be destroyed and his empire never come to an end. He saves, sets free, and works signs and wonders in the heavens and on earth. He has saved Daniel from the power of the lions." This Daniel flourished in the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. Daniel, chapter 7. In the first year of Belshazzar king of Babylon, Daniel had a dream and visions that passed through his head as he lay in bed. He wrote the dream down, and this is how the narrative began. Daniel said, "I have been seeing visions in the night. I saw that the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea. 4 great beasts emerged from the sea, each different from the others. The first was like a lion with eagle's wings, and, as I looked, its wings were torn off, and it was lifted off the ground and set standing on its feet like a human, and it was given a human heart. And there before me was a second beast, like a bear, rearing up on one side, with 3 ribs in its mouth, between its teeth. Up came the command, 'Eat quantities of flesh.' After this I looked, and there before me was another beast, like a leopard, and with 4 birds' wings on its flanks. It had 4 heads and was granted authority. Next, in the visions of the night, I saw another vision. There before me was a 4th beast, fearful, terrifying, very strong. It had great iron teeth, and it ate its victims, crushed them, and trampled their remains underfoot. It was different from the previous beasts and had 10 horns. While I was looking at these horns, I saw another horn sprouting among them, a little one. 3 of the original horns were pulled out by the roots to make way for it. And in this horn I saw eyes like human eyes, and a mouth full of boasting. While I was watching, thrones were set in place, and one most venerable took his seat. His robe was white as snow, the hair of his head as pure as wool. His throne was a blaze of flames. Its wheels were a burning fire. A stream of fire poured out, issuing from his presence. 1,000,000 waited on him. 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The court was in session and the books lay open. I went on watching. Then, because of the noise made by the boastings of the horn, as I watched, the beast was put to death, and its body destroyed and committed to the flames. The other beasts were deprived of their empire, but received a lease of life for a season and a time. I was gazing into the visions of the night, when I saw, coming on the clouds of heaven, as it were a son of man. He came to the one most venerable and was led into his presence. On him was conferred rule, honor, and kingship, and all peoples, nations and languages became his servants. His rule is an everlasting rule which will never pass away, and his kingship will never come to an end. I, Daniel, was deeply disturbed, and the visions that passed through my head alarmed me. So I approached one of those who were standing by and asked him about all this. And in reply he revealed to me what these things meant. These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who will rise up from the earth. Those who receive royal power are the holy ones of the Most High, and kingship will be theirs forever, forever and ever. Then I asked about the 4th beast, different from all the rest, very terrifying, with iron teeth and bronze claws. It ate its victims, crushed them, and trampled their remains underfoot, and about the 10 horns on its head, and why the other horn sprouted and the 3 original horns fell, and why this horn had eyes and a mouth full of boasting, and why it looked more impressive than its fellows. This was the horn I had watched making war on the holy ones and proving the stronger, until the coming of the one most venerable who gave judgment in favor of the holy ones of the Most High, when the time came for the holy ones to assume kingship. This is what he said: the 4th beast is to be a 4th kingdom on earth, different from all other kingdoms. It will devour the whole world, trample it underfoot and crush it. As for the 10 horns, from this kingdom will rise 10 kings, and another after them. This one will be different from the previous ones and will bring down 3 kings. He will insult the Most High, and torment the holy ones of the Most High. He will plan to alter the seasons and the law, and the saints will be handed over to him for a time, 2 times, and half a time. But the court will sit, and he will be stripped of his royal authority, which will be finally destroyed and reduced to nothing. And kingship and rule and the splendors of all the kingdoms under heaven will be given to the people of the holy ones of the Most High, whose royal power is an eternal power, whom every empire will serve and obey. Here the narrative ends. I, Daniel, was greatly disturbed in mind, and I grew pale, but I kept these things to myself. Daniel chapter 8. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after the one that had originally appeared to me. I gazed at the vision, and as I gazed I found myself in Susa, the citadel in the province of Elam. Gazing at the vision, I found myself at the Ulai gate. I raised my eyes to look, and I saw a ram standing in front of the gate. It had 2 horns. Both were tall, but one taller than the other, and the one that rose the higher was the second. I saw the ram butting westwards, northwards and southwards. No animal could stand up to it. Nothing could escape its power. It did as it pleased and became strong. This is what I observed: a he-goat from the west, encroaching over the entire surface of the world though never touching the ground, and between its eyes the goat had 1 majestic horn. It advanced on the 2-horned ram, which I had seen standing in front of the gate, and charged at it in the full force of its fury. I saw it reach the ram. It was enraged with the ram and struck it, breaking both its horns, so that the ram was not strong enough to hold its ground. It threw it to the ground and trampled it underfoot. No one was there to rescue the ram. The he-goat then grew more powerful than ever, but at the height of its strength the great horn snapped, and in its place sprouted 4 majestic horns, pointing to the 4 winds of heaven. From one of these, the small one, sprang a horn which grew to great size towards south and east and towards the land of splendor. It grew right up to the armies of heaven and flung armies and stars to the ground, and trampled them underfoot. It even challenged the power of the prince of the army. It abolished the perpetual sacrifice and overthrew the foundation of his sanctuary, and the army too. Over the sacrifice it installed iniquity and flung truth to the ground. The horn was active and successful. I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one say to the speaker, "How long is this vision to be, of perpetual sacrifice, of horrifying iniquity, of sanctuary and army trampled underfoot?" The first replied, "Until 2,300 evenings and mornings have gone by. Then the sanctuary will have its rights restored." As I, Daniel, gazed at the vision and tried to understand it, I saw someone standing in front of me who looked like a man. I heard a human voice cry over the Ulai, "Gabriel, Tell him the meaning of the vision." He approached the place where I was standing. As he approached, I was seized with terror and fell prostrate on the ground. "Son of man," he said to me, "understand this. The vision shows the time of the end." He was still speaking when I fainted, face downwards on the ground. He touched me, however, and raised me to my feet. "Come," he said, "I shall tell you what is going to happen when the retribution is over, about the final times. As for the ram which you saw, its 2 horns are the kings of Media and of Persia. The hairy he-goat is the king of Greece. The large horn between its eyes is the first king. The horn which snapped and the 4 horns which sprouted in its place are 4 kingdoms rising from his nation but not having his strength. And at the end of their reign, when the measure of their sins is full, a king will arise, a proud-faced, ingenious-minded man. His power will grow greater and greater, though not through any power of his own. He will plot incredible schemes. He will succeed in whatever he undertakes. He will destroy powerful men and the holy ones, God's people. Such will be his resourcefulness of mind that all his treacherous activities will succeed. He will grow arrogant of heart and destroy many people by taking them unawares. He will challenge the power of the Prince of Princes, but, without any human intervention, he will be broken. The vision of the evenings and the mornings which has been revealed is true, but you must keep the vision secret, for there are still many days to go. At this I, Daniel, lost consciousness. I was ill for several days. Then I got up to discharge my duties in the king's service, keeping the vision a secret and still not understanding what it meant. Daniel, chapter 9. It was the first year of Darius son of Artaxerxes, a Mede by race who assumed the throne of Chaldea. In the first year of his reign I, Daniel, was studying the Scriptures, counting over the number of years, as revealed by Yahweh to the prophet Jeremiah, that were to pass before the desolation of Jerusalem would come to an end, namely 70 years. I turned my face to the Lord God, begging for time to pray and to plead, with fasting, sackcloth, and ashes. I pleaded with Yahweh my God and made this confession: O my Lord, God great and to be feared, you keep the covenant and show faithful love towards those who love you and who observe your commandments. We have sinned, we have done wrong, we have acted wickedly, we have betrayed your commandments and rulings and turned away from them. We have not listened to your servants the prophets, who spoke in your name to our kings, our chief men, our ancestors and all people of the country. Saving justice, Lord, is yours. We have only the look of shame we wear today, we, the people of Judah, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the whole of Israel near and far away, in every country to which you have dispersed us because of the treachery we have committed against you. To us, our kings, our chief men and our ancestors, belongs the look of shame, O Yahweh, since we have sinned against you. And it is for the Lord our God to have mercy and to pardon, since we have betrayed him, and have not listened to the voice of Yahweh our God, nor followed the laws he has given us through his servants the prophets. The whole of Israel has flouted your law and turned away, unwilling to listen to your voice, and the curse and imprecation written in the law of Moses, the servant of God, have come pouring down on us, because we have sinned against him. He has carried out the threats which he made against us and the chief men who governed us, that he would bring so great a disaster down on us that the fate of Jerusalem would find no parallel under all heaven. And now, as written in the law of Moses, this whole calamity has befallen us. Even so, we have not appeased Yahweh our God by renouncing our crimes and learning your truth. Yahweh has watched for the right moment to bring disaster on us, since Yahweh our God is just in all his dealings with us, and we have not listened to his voice. And now, Lord our God, who by your mighty hand brought us out of Egypt, the renown you won then endures to this day. We have sinned, we have done wrong. Lord, by all your acts of saving justice, turn away your anger and your fury from Jerusalem, your city, your holy mountain. For as a result of our sins and the crimes of our ancestors, Jerusalem and your people are objects of scorn to all who surround us. And now, our God, listen to the prayer and pleading of your servant. For your own sake, Lord, Let your face smile again on your desolate sanctuary.
Listen, my God, listen to us. Open your eyes and look at our plight and at the city that bears your name.
Relying not on our upright deeds but on your great mercy, we pour out our plea to you. Listen, Lord. Forgive, Lord. Hear, Lord, and act. For your own sake, my God, do not delay, since your city and your people alike bear your name. I was still speaking, still at prayer, confessing my own sins and the sins of my people Israel, and placing my plea before Yahweh my God for the holy mountain of my God, still speaking, still at prayer, when Gabriel, the being I had originally seen in vision, swooped on me in full flight at the hour of the evening sacrifice. He came, he spoke, he said to me, "Now, Daniel, I have come down to teach you how to understand. When your pleading began, a word was uttered, and I have come to tell you. You are a man specially chosen. Grasp the meaning of the word, understand the vision. 70 weeks are decreed for your people and your holy city, for putting an end to transgression, for placing the seal on sin, for expiating crime, for introducing everlasting uprightness, for setting the seal on vision and on prophecy, for anointing the Holy of Holies. Know this, then, and understand. From the time there went out this message, return and rebuild Jerusalem to the coming of an anointed prince, 7 weeks and 62 weeks, with squares and ramparts restored and rebuilt, but in a time of trouble.
And after the 62 weeks an anointed one put to death without his city and sanctuary ruined by a prince who is to come.
The end of that prince will be catastrophe, and, until the end, there will be war and all the devastation decreed. He will strike a firm alliance with many people for the space of a week, and for the space of 1/2 week he will put a stop to sacrifice and oblation, and on the wing of the temple will be the appalling abomination until the end, until the doom assigned to the devastator. Daniel chapter 10. In the 3rd year of Cyrus king of Persia, a revelation was made to Daniel known as Belteshazzar, a true revelation of a great conflict. He grasped the meaning of the revelation. What it meant was disclosed to him in a vision. At that time I, Daniel, was doing a 3-week penance. I ate no agreeable food, touched no meat or wine, and did not anoint myself, until these 3 weeks were over. On the 24th day of the 1st month, as I stood on the bank of that great river, the Tigris, I raised my eyes to look about me, and this is what I saw: a man dressed in linen, with a belt of pure gold round his waist. His body was like beryl, his face looked like lightning, his eyes were like fiery torches, his arms and his face had the gleam of burnished bronze. The sound of his voice was like the roar of a multitude. I, Daniel, alone saw the apparition. The men who were with me did not see the vision, but so great a trembling overtook them that they fled to hide. I was left alone, gazing on this great vision. I was powerless, my appearance was changed and contorted. My strength deserted me. I heard a voice speaking, and at the sound of the voice I fell fainting, face downwards on the ground. I felt a hand touching me, setting my knees and my hands trembling. He said, "Daniel, you are a man specially chosen. Understand the words that I am about to say. Stand up. I have been sent to you now." He said this, and I stood up trembling. He then said, "Daniel, do not be afraid. From that first day when, the better to understand, you resolved to mortify yourself before God, your words have been heard, and your words are the reason why I have come. The prince of the kingdom of Persia has been resisting me for 21 days. But Michael, one of the chief princes, came to my assistance. I have left him confronting the kings of Persia and have come to tell you what will happen to your people in the final days. For here is a new vision about those days." When he had said these things to me, I prostrated myself on the ground, without saying a word. Then someone looking like a man touched my lips. I opened my mouth to speak, and I said to the person standing in front of me, "My Lord, anguish overcomes me at this vision, and my strength deserts me. How can your servant speak to my Lord now that I have no strength left and my breath fails me?" Once again, the person like a man touched me,
He gave me strength.
"Do not be afraid," he said. "You are a man specially chosen. Peace be with you. Play the man, be strong." And as he spoke to me, I felt strong again and said, "Let my Lord speak. You have given me strength." He then said, "Do you know why I have come to you? It is to tell you what is written in the book of truth. I must go back to fight the prince of Persia. When I have overcome him, the prince of Javan will come next, and all this, there is no one to lend me support except Michael your prince." Daniel, chapter 11. On whom I rely to give me support and to reinforce me. And now I shall tell you the truth about these things.
3 more kings are going to rise in Persia. A 4th will come and be richer than all the others. And when, thanks to his wealth, he has grown powerful, he will make war on all the kingdoms of Greece. A mighty king will rise and govern a vast empire and do whatever he pleases. But once he has come to power, his empire will be broken up and parceled out to the 4 winds of heaven, though not to his descendants. It will not be ruled as he ruled it, for his sovereignty will be uprooted and will pass to others than his own descendants. The king of the south will grow powerful, but one of his princes will grow more powerful still, with an empire greater than his own. Some years later, these will conclude a treaty, and to ratify the agreement, the daughter of the king of the south will go to the king of the north. Her arm will not, however, retain its strength, nor his posterity endure. She will be handed over, she, her escorts and her child, and he who has had authority over her. In due time a sprig from her roots will rise in his place, will march on the defenses, force the stronghold of the king of the north, and succeed in overcoming them. He will even carry off all their gods, their statues, their precious gold and silver vessels as booty to Egypt. For some years he will leave the king of the north in peace, but the latter will invade the kingdom of the king of the south, then retire to his own country. His sons will next be on the march, mustering a host of powerful forces, and he will advance, deploy, break through and march on the southern stronghold once again. The king of the south will fly into a rage and set out to give battle to the king of the north, who will have an immense army on his side, but this army will be defeated by him. The army will be annihilated. He will be triumphant. He will overthrow tens of thousands, yet he will have no enduring strength. The king of the north will come back, having recruited an even larger army than before, and finally, after some years, he will advance a second time with a great army and plentiful supplies. At that time, many will take up arms against the king of the south, and the more violent of your own people will rebel in the hope of realizing the vision, but they will fail. The king of the north will then come and throw up siege works to capture a strongly fortified city. The forces of the south will not stand their ground. The pick of the people will not be strong enough to resist. The invader will do as he pleases. No one will be able to resist him. He will take his stand in the land of splendor, destruction in his hands. He will set about conquering his entire kingdom, but will then make a treaty with him and, to overthrow the kingdom, give him a woman's hand. But this will not last or be to his advantage. He will next turn to the coasts and islands and conquer many of them, but a magistrate will put a stop to his outrages in such a way that he will be unable to repay outrage for outrage. He will then turn on the strongholds of his own country, but will stumble, fall, and never be seen again. In his place there will rise a man who will send an extortioner to despoil the royal splendor. In a few days he will be shattered, though neither publicly nor in battle. In his place will rise a wretch. Royal honors will not be given to him, but rather he will insinuate himself into them at his pleasure and will gain possession of the kingdom by intrigue. Armies will be utterly routed and crushed by him. The prince of the covenant too. Through his alliances he will act treacherously and, despite the smallness of his following, grow ever stronger. At his pleasure, he will invade rich provinces, acting as his fathers or his fathers' fathers never acted, distributing among them plunder, spoil, and wealth, plotting his stratagems against the fortresses, for a time. He will summon up his might and courage against the king of the south with a great army. The king of the south will march to war with a huge and powerful army but will not succeed, since he will be outwitted by trickery. Those who shared his food will ruin him. His army will be swept away, many will fall in the slaughter. The two kings, seated at one table, hearts bent on evil, will tell their lies. But they will not have their way, for the appointed time is still to come. Then the wretch will return greatly enriched to his own country, his heart set against the holy covenant. He will take action and then return to his own country. In due time, he will make his way southwards again, but this time the outcome will not be as before. The ships of the Kittim will oppose him, and he will be worsted. He will retire and take furious action against the holy covenant and, as before, will favor those who forsake that holy covenant. Forces of his will come and profane the citadel sanctuary. They will abolish the perpetual sacrifice and install the appalling abomination there. Those who break the covenant he will seduce by his blandishments. But the people who know their God will stand firm and take action. Those of the people who are wise leaders will instruct many. For some days, however, they will stumble from sword and flame, captivity and pillage. And thus stumbling, little help will they receive, though many will be scheming in their support. Of the wise leaders some will stumble, and so a number of them will be purged, purified and made clean, until the time of the end, for the appointed time is still to come. The king will do as he pleases, growing more and more arrogant, considering himself greater than all the gods. He will utter incredible blasphemies against the God of gods, and he will thrive until the wrath reaches bursting point, for what has been decreed will certainly be fulfilled. Heedless of his father's gods, heedless of the God whom women love, heedless of any god whatever, he will consider himself greatest of all. Instead of them, he will honor the God of fortresses, will honor a God unknown to his ancestors with gold and silver, precious stones and valuable presents. He will use the people of an alien God to defend the fortresses. He will confer great honors on those whom he acknowledges, by giving them wide authority and by parcelling the country out for rent. When the time comes for the end, the king of the south will try conclusions with him. But the king of the north will come storming down on him with chariots, cavalry, and a large fleet. He will invade countries, overrun them and drive on. He will invade the land of splendor, and many will fall. But Edom, Moab, and what remains of the sons of Ammon will escape him. He will reach out to attack countries. Egypt will not escape him. The gold and silver treasures and all the valuables of Egypt will lie in his power. Libyans and Cushites will be at his feet. But reports coming from the east and the north will worry him, and in great fury he will set out to bring ruin and complete destruction to many. He will pitch the tents of his royal headquarters between the sea and the mountains of the holy splendor. Yet he will come to his end. There will be no help for him. Daniel, chapter 12. At that time Michael will arise, the great prince, defender of your people. That will be a time of great distress, unparalleled since nations first came into existence. When that time comes, your own people will be spared. All those whose names are found written in the book. Of those who are sleeping in the land of dust, many will awaken, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting disgrace. Those who are wise will shine as brightly as the expanse of the heavens, and those who have instructed many in uprightness, as bright as stars for all eternity. But you, Daniel, must keep these words secret and keep the book sealed until the time of the end. Many will roam about, this way and that, and wickedness will continue to increase. I, Daniel, then looked and saw two other people standing, one on the near bank of the river, the other on the far. One of them said to the man dressed in linen who was standing further up the stream, "How long until these wonders take place?" I heard the man speak who was dressed in linen, standing further up the stream. He raised his right hand and his left to heaven and swore by him who lives forever, a time and 2 times, and half a time, and all these things will come true, once the crushing of the holy people's power is over. I listened but did not understand.
I then said, "My lord, what is to be the outcome?" "Go, Daniel," he said. "These words are to remain secret and sealed until the time of the end. Many will be cleansed, made white and purged. The wicked will persist in doing wrong. The wicked will never understand. Those who are wise will understand. From the moment that the perpetual sacrifice is abolished and the appalling abomination set up, 1,290 days. Blessed is he who perseveres and attains 1,335 days. But you, go away and rest, and you will rise for your reward at the end of time." Daniel, chapter 13. In Babylon there lived a man named Joachim. He was married to a woman called Susanna, daughter of Hilkiah, a woman of great beauty, and she was God-fearing, for her parents were worthy people and had instructed their daughter in the law of Moses. Joachim was a very rich man and had a garden by his house. He used to be visited by a considerable number of the Jews, since he was held in greater respect than any other man. 2 elderly men had been selected from the people that year to act as judges. Of such the Lord had said, "Wickedness has come to Babylon through the elders and judges posing as guides to the people." These men were often at Joachim's house, and all who were engaged in litigation used to come to them. At midday, when the people had gone away, Susanna would take a walk in her husband's garden. The 2 elders, who used to watch her every day as she came in to take her walk, gradually began to desire her. They threw reason aside, making no effort to turn their eyes to heaven, and forgetting the demands of virtue. Both were inflamed by passion for her, but they hid their desire from each other, for they were ashamed to admit the longing to sleep with her, but they made sure of watching her every day. One day, having parted with the words, "Let us go home, then, it is time for the midday meal," they went off in different directions, only to retrace their steps and find themselves face to face again. Obliged then to explain, they admitted their desire and agreed to look for an opportunity of surprising her alone. So they waited for a favorable moment, and one day Susanna came as usual, accompanied only by 2 young maidservants. The day was hot and she wanted to bathe in the garden. There was no one about except the 2 elders, spying on her from their hiding place. She said to the servants, "Bring me some oil and balsam and shut the garden door while I bathe." They did as they were told, shutting the garden door and going back to the house by a side entrance to fetch what she had asked for. They knew nothing about the elders, for they had concealed themselves. Hardly were the maids gone than the 2 elders sprang up and rushed upon her. "Look," they said, "the garden door is shut. No one can see us. We want to have you, so give in and let us. Refuse, and we shall both give evidence that a young man was with you and that this was why you sent your maids away." Susanna sighed. "I am trapped," she said, "whatever I do. If I agree, it means death for me. If I resist, I cannot get away from you. But I prefer to fall innocent into your power than to sin in the eyes of the Lord." She then cried out as loud as she could. The 2 elders began shouting too, putting the blame on her, and one of them ran to open the garden door. The household, hearing the shouting in the garden, rushed out by the side entrance to see what had happened to her. Once the elders had told their story, the servants were thoroughly taken aback, since nothing of this sort had ever been said of Susanna. Next day a meeting was held at the house of her husband Joachim. The 2 elders arrived, full of their wicked plea against Susanna, to have her put to death. They addressed the company, summoned Susanna, daughter of Hilkiah and wife of Joachim. She was sent for, and came accompanied by her parents, her children and all her relations. Susanna was very graceful and beautiful to look at. She was veiled, so the wretches made her unveil in order to feast their eyes on her beauty. All her own people were weeping, and so were all the others who saw her. The 2 elders stood up, with all the people round them, and laid their hands on her head. Tearfully she turned her eyes to heaven, her heart confident in God. The elders then spoke, while we were walking by ourselves in the garden. This woman arrived with 2 maids. She shut the garden door and then dismissed the servants. A young man, who had been hiding, went over to her and they lay together. From the end of the garden where we were, we saw this crime taking place and hurried towards them. Though we saw them together, we were unable to catch the man. He was too strong for us. He opened the door and took to his heels. We did, however, catch this woman and ask her who the young man was. She refused to tell us. That is our evidence.
Since they were elders of the people and judges, the assembly accepted their word. Susanna was condemned to death. She cried out as loud as she could, "Eternal God, you know all secrets and everything before it happens. You know that they have given false evidence against me, and now I must die, innocent as I am of everything their malice has invented against me." The Lord heard her cry, and, as she was being led away to die, He roused the Holy Spirit residing in a young boy called Daniel, who began to shout, "I am innocent of this woman's death." At this all the people turned to him and asked, "What do you mean by that?" Standing in the middle of the crowd, he replied, "Are you so stupid, children of Israel, as to condemn a daughter of Israel unheard, and without troubling to find out the truth? Go back to the scene of the trial. These men have given false evidence against her." All the people hurried back, and the elders said to Daniel, "Come and sit with us and tell us what you mean, since God has given you the gifts that elders have." Daniel said, "Keep the men well apart from each other, for I want to question them." When the men had been separated, Daniel had one of them brought to him. "You have grown old in wickedness," he said, "and now the sins of your earlier days have overtaken you, you with your unjust judgments, your condemnation of the innocent, your acquittal of the guilty. Although the Lord has said, 'You must not put the innocent and upright to death.' Now then, since you saw her so clearly, tell me what sort of tree you saw them lying under." He replied, "Under an acacia tree." Daniel said, "Indeed, your lie recoils on your own head. The angel of God has already received from him your sentence and will cut you in half." He dismissed the man, ordered the other to be brought, and said to him, "Son of Canaan, not of Judah, beauty has seduced you, lust has led your heart astray. This is how you have been behaving with the daughters of Israel, and they have been too frightened to resist. But here is a daughter of Judah who could not stomach your wickedness. Now then, tell me what sort of tree you surprised them under." He replied, "Under an aspen tree." Daniel said, "Indeed, your lie recoils on your own head. The angel of God is waiting with a sword to rend you in half and destroy the pair of you." Then the whole assembly shouted, blessing God, the Savior of those who trust in him. And they turned on the 2 elders whom Daniel had convicted of false evidence out of their own mouths. As the law of Moses prescribes, they were given the same punishment as they had schemed to inflict on their neighbor. They were put to death. And thus, that day, an innocent life was saved. Hilkiah and his wife gave thanks to God for their daughter Susanna, and so did her husband Joachim and all his relations, because she had been acquitted of anything dishonorable. From that day onwards, Daniel's reputation stood high with the people. Daniel, chapter 14. When King Astyages joined his ancestors, Cyrus of Persia succeeded him. Daniel was very close to the king, who respected him more than any of his other friends. Now, in Babylon there was an idol called Bel, to which 12 bushels of the finest flour, 40 sheep and 6 measures of wine were offered every day. The king venerated this idol and used to go and worship it every day. Daniel, however, worshipped his own God. "Why do you not worship Bel?" the king asked Daniel. "I do not worship idols made by human hand," Daniel replied. "I worship the living God who made heaven and earth and who is Lord over all living creatures." "Do you not believe then," said the king, "that Bel is a living God? Can you not see how much he eats and drinks each day?" Daniel laughed. "Your Majesty," he said, "do not be taken in. He is clay inside and bronze outside,
and has never eaten or drunk anything." This made the king angry. He summoned his priests. "Tell me who eats all this food," he said, "or die. Prove to me that Bel really eats it, and I will have Daniel put to death for blaspheming him." Daniel said to the king, "Let it be as you say." There were 70 of these priests, to say nothing of their wives and children. The king went to the temple of Bel, taking Daniel with him. The priests of Bel said to him, "We shall now go out, and you, your majesty, will lay out the meal and mix the wine and set it out. Then, lock the door and seal it with your personal seal. If, when you return in the morning, you do not find that everything has been eaten by Bel, let us be put to death. Otherwise let Daniel, that slanderer." They were thinking, hence their confidence, of a secret entrance which they had made under the table, and by which they came in regularly and took the offerings away. When the priests had gone and the king had set out the food for Bel, Daniel made his servants bring ashes and spread them all over the temple floor, with no other witness than the king. They then left the building, shut the door, and, sealing it with the king's seal, went away. That night, as usual, the priests came with their wives and children. They ate and drank everything. The king was up very early next morning, and Daniel with him. "Daniel," said the king, "are the seals intact?" "They are intact, your majesty," he replied. The king then opened the door and, taking one look at the table, exclaimed, "You are great, O Bel! There is no deception in you." But Daniel laughed, and restraining the king from going in any further, he said, "Look at the floor and take note whose footmarks these are." "I can see the footmarks of men, of women, and of children," said the king, and angrily ordered the priests to be arrested, with their wives and children. They then showed him the secret door through which they used to come and take what was on the table. The king had them put to death and handed Bel over to Daniel, who destroyed both the idol and its temple. There was a great dragon which the Babylonians worshipped too. The king said to Daniel, "Are you going to tell me that this is made of bronze? Look, it is alive. It eats and drinks. You cannot deny that this is a living God. Worship it, then." Daniel replied, "I will worship the Lord my God. He is the living God. With your permission, your majesty, without using either sword or club, I shall kill this dragon." "You have my permission," said the king. Whereupon, Daniel took some pitch, some fat and some hair and boiled them up together, rolled the mixture into balls and fed them to the dragon. The dragon swallowed them and burst. Daniel said, "Now look at the sort of thing you worship." The Babylonians were furious when they heard about this and rose against the king. "The king has turned Jew," they said. "He has allowed Bel to be overthrown, and the dragon to be killed, and he has put the priests to death." So they went to the king and said, "Hand Daniel over to us, or else we shall kill you and your family." They pressed him so hard that the king found himself forced to hand Daniel over to them. They threw Daniel into the lion pit, and there he stayed for 6 days. In the pit were 7 lions, which were given 2 human bodies and 2 sheep every day. But for this period they were not given anything, to make sure they would eat Daniel. Now, the prophet Habakkuk was in Judea. He had been making a stew and breaking up bread into a basket. He was on his way to the fields, taking this to the harvesters, when the angel of the Lord spoke to him, "Take the meal you are carrying to Babylon, and give it to Daniel in the lion pit." "Lord," replied Habakkuk, "I have not even seen Babylon and know nothing about this pit." The angel of the Lord took hold of his head and carried him off by the hair to Babylon, where, with a great blast of his breath, he set Habakkuk down on the edge of the pit. "Daniel, Daniel," Habakkuk shouted, "take the meal that God has sent you." And Daniel said, "You have kept me in mind, O God. You have not deserted those who love you." Rising to his feet, he ate the meal, while the angel of God carried Habakkuk back in a moment to his own country. On the 7th day, the king came to lament over Daniel. On reaching the pit he looked inside, and there sat Daniel. "You are great, O Lord God of Daniel," he exclaimed. "There is no God but you,
He then had Daniel released from the pit and the plotters of Daniel's ruin thrown in instead, where they were instantly eaten before his eyes.